welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into a really interesting resource. It's the Anxiety and Panic Disorder Patient Treatment Manual from CRUA. And this isn't just, a book about anxiety. It's more like a full guide, a workbook even.
That's right. It's designed for people to actually use during treatment and then keep using afterwards as a tool.
Exactly.
Practical.
And it's got deep roots. This isn't something new. Comes from clinical work going way back, started around 1978. Builds on lots of expert input over the years.
So, our mission for this deep dive. We want to get into the core strategies, obviously, but maybe more importantly, the why behind them. What are the key insights?
Yeah, what makes these approaches work? What's the thinking behind them?
Right. What does this manual really tell us about panic itself and how we can maybe actively engage with it differently?
Okay, let's unpack this.
Great. So where do they start? Well, it seems like they ground everything in something pretty fundamental, the fight or flight response. That ancient survival wiring. We share it with loads of species. It kicks in when there's a threat, gets you ready.
Heart pounds, breathing speeds up, muscles tense, all that stuff to fight. Or, well, run away.
But here's the crucial bit for anxiety and panic, and the manual really highlights this. That same system, it can fire off even when there's no actual external danger, no tiger.
Right, so your body is reacting as if there's a huge threat, pumping out all those intense physical feelings.
Exactly. And because you look around and there's, nothing obvious out there to be scared of.
You start thinking the danger must be internal, right? Like, oh no, this pounding heart means I'm having a heart attack, or this dizziness means I'm losing my mind.
Precisely. The physical sensations themselves become the perceived threat. It's a really scary feedback loop.
Okay, so connecting that idea, the manual brings in that ABC model, right? Which folks might know from CBT.
Yeah, it's a classic. A is the activating event or situation. C is the consequence, the emotion, the behavior.
But the key, the manual stresses, is B. Your beliefs, your thoughts, your interpretation of A. That's what really drives C.
So it's not just being in a crowded shop A that automatically leads to panic.
No, it's the thought B, like I'm trapped or people are judging me, that triggers the panic response, C.
And the manual uses this framework not just to explain things, but as a kind of roadmap for change, which leads to the big question.
If you can change B, your thoughts and interpretations, can you change C, your reaction, even when the physical feelings are intense?
And the manual's answer, based on all the tools it offers, is basically yes, you absolutely can influence that cycle.
Okay, so let's dig into those tools. They seem to start with managing the physical side, first breathing and muscle tension, which makes sense given they're so central to the panic feeling.
Definitely. First up is controlling hyperventilation. Now, in this context, that just means breathing too fast or too deep for what your body needs right then.
And they mention things that can trigger it, right? Like rushing around, stress, maybe even alcohol or PMS.
Yeah, everyday things. So the core technique they teach is slow breathing, and it's quite specific.
That's specific.
They aim for a rate of about 10 breaths a minute. So that's a 6-second cycle, roughly 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out. And importantly, breathing from the abdomen, not the chest, through the nose. And they add a little mental anchor.
It is.
Silently saying the word relax to yourself as you breathe out.
Okay. Simple, but probably effective.
The idea isn't just calm down, it's physiological. That slower, deeper breathing actually changes the oxygen-CO2 balance, which can directly reduce those physical symptoms like dizziness or tingling that often feed into panic.
So it's a skill you need to practice, not just for when panic hits, but maybe daily.
Exactly. They stress practice. They even include forms for tracking your breathing rate daily. The goal is to get so used to it that you can use it preventatively or to quickly reduce symptoms if they start, within a minute or two, ideally.
And they acknowledge it feels weird at first.
Oh yeah, totally unnatural if you're a chest breather. They suggest using a watch or timer and just persevering, even if focusing on your breath feels a bit strange initially. It takes practice, like any skill.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, what about relaxation? That's often paired with breathing.
Relaxation training, they define it as consciously, voluntarily letting go of tension, both physical and mental.
And why is that so important?
Well, the insight here is that chronic anxiety often leads to chronically high muscle tension. You might not even notice it, but it causes fatigue, irritability, makes you kind of jumpy.
And more likely to react strongly to triggers,
Yeah.
making panic attacks easier to set off.
Exactly. So relaxation training helps lower that baseline level of arousal. It's about changing your body's default state from on edge to something calmer.
And again, it's a skill. needs practice.
Daily practice, ideally. It involves learning to first notice the tension, then achieving a general sense of relaxation, and finally being able to release tension in specific muscles when you need to.
And they talk about isometric exercises being useful because you can do them anywhere.
Yeah, those are really practical. The basic idea is take a small breath in, gently tense some muscle group, say your forearm, but only to maybe 60-70% tension, not straining hold for 5-7 seconds.
Okay.
Then breathe out slowly, again, maybe over 7 seconds, and consciously release the tension as you exhale, maybe thinking relax, repeat if you need to.
And you can do this subtly, like under a desk.
Totally. Tensing leg muscles by pressing your feet down or crossing your ankles, tensing your hands together, ways you can do it in public without anyone noticing.
So the point is building that awareness and the habit of letting go anytime, anywhere.
Right. It fosters a sense of control over your physical state, which builds confidence.
Do they mention why people find relaxation hard sometimes? It sounds simple, but...
They do, and they say it's rarely a physical problem, like you can't relax, it's usually psychological stuff. Feeling guilty, taking the time, being impatient, expecting instant results, not finding a quiet space.
Right, the practicalities or the mindset.
Yeah. And the manual really puts the onus on the individual you have to take responsibility for making it happen, for developing the skill through consistent effort. Nobody can just give it to you.
Okay, so you work on the breathing, the relaxation.
Yeah.
Give some handle on the physical stuff. Then the manual moves towards facing the fears more directly.
Exactly. This is where graded exposure comes in, sometimes called situational exposure. It's about tackling the situations, places, or activities you've been avoiding because of anxiety or panic.
Because avoidance, while it feels safer short term, just keeps the fear alive.
Precisely. You never learn that you can cope, or that the terrible thing you fear probably won't happen. And avoidance isn't always obvious, like staying home. It can be subtle, only going places with a safe person, needing distractions.
So how does graded exposure work according to the manual? It sounds like it needs structure.
It's very structured. The key is to plan it out. Set clear, realistic goals like, I want to be able to go to the supermarket alone. Then break that big goal down into much smaller, manageable steps.
How small are we talking?
Really small. You vary the difficulty. For the supermarket goal, maybe step 1 is just walking to the entrance at a quiet time. Step 2, walking inside for 1 minute. Step 3, walking down 1 aisle. Then maybe trying at a busier time, staying longer, buying 1 item.
Ah, okay. Incrementally increasing the challenge.
Yeah, you can vary things like, are you alone or with someone? Time of day, distance from home, how long you stay, how much you do in the situation. The manual gives great examples like detailed step for train travel, varying distance and crowd levels.
And there's a rule about confidence.
Yes, this is crucial. They say you should be at least 75% confident you can manage a step before you attempt it.
75%, that's quite high. It's not about just throwing yourself in the deep end then.
Not at all. It's about setting yourself up for success. Each small victory builds confidence and retrains your brain. It shows you that discomfort is manageable and the feared outcome is unlikely. It turns overwhelming threats into achievable challenges.
Okay, that makes sense. Now what about this other type of exposure they mentioned? Producing panic sensations. That sounds less appealing.
Yeah, that's interoceptive exposure. And you're right, it sounds counterintuitive. It involves deliberately doing things to bring on physical sensations that are similar to the ones you get during panic.
Why on earth would you do that?
Well, the goal is to tackle the fear of the sensations themselves. Remember how we said the pounding heart or dizziness can become the trigger?
Right, because you interpret them as dangerous.
Exactly. So by intentionally creating these sensations in a controlled, safe setting, you learn through direct experience that they're just sensations. Uncomfortable, maybe, but not actually harmful. You desensitize yourself to your body's internal false alarms.
But don't everyday things like running upstairs cause those feelings anyway?
They do, and the manual acknowledges that people often misinterpret those normal sensations. But in real life, the start and end are unpredictable, which adds anxiety. And if you focus intensely on them, you can make the fear worse. Interoceptive exposure gives you that controlled practice.
What kind of exercises do they suggest?
Things like deliberately hyperventilating for maybe 60 seconds, shaking your head side to side, spinning in a chair, holding your breath, tensing your whole body really hard.
Wow, okay. And what do you do after you've, say, hyperventilated?
You stop the exercise, let the sensations fade naturally, and then you record what you felt, what thoughts went with it, rate your anxiety level, and rate how similar it felt to your actual panic attacks.
And if your anxiety rating is high,
Then you repeat the same exercise right then and there until the anxiety rating comes down significantly. Often just doing it a second or third time reduces the fear dramatically.
So it really is like graded exposure, but for internal feelings instead of external situations.
That's a perfect way to put it. Systematically confronting the feared internal cues to break the link between the sensation and the catastrophic thought.
And they contrast this with real-life activities that cause similar feelings.
Yeah, they point out that in real life, like during exercise, you don't have the same control over when the sensations start or stop, which can be harder initially. Plus, the natural tendency to focus on the sensations in daily life can actually prolong the fear response, whereas these exercises teach you to just experience and let them pass.
Right. Okay, so we've covered managing the body and facing the fears. Let's circle back to that ABC model, specifically the beliefs and thoughts. How does the manual suggest working on those?
It lays out a pretty clear 3-step process for what's often called cognitive restructuring. Step 1, identify the thoughts. Step 2, challenge them. Step 3, generate more realistic alternatives.
And they frame it as changing a habit, right? Like anxious thinking is a habit you can unlearn and replace.
Exactly. It takes practice.
Yeah.
So step 1, identify. What actually goes through your mind when you feel anxious? What are you thinking about yourself? What catastrophe do you fear will happen? How do you think you'll cope or fail to cope?
And they point out common errors in thinking for people with panic.
Big ones are overestimating the chances of having a panic attack and wildly exaggerating how bad the consequences would be if you did medically, like dying or fainting, psychologically, like going crazy, or socially, like total humiliation.
Okay, so once you've identified those thoughts, step 2 is challenging them. How do you do that?
You become like a detective, questioning a shaky witness your own anxious thoughts. The manual suggests specific questions. What's the actual evidence for this fear? Is there evidence against it? How likely, realistically, is this bad outcome?
Not just possibly, but likely.
Right, and what's the worst that could realistically happen? Not the absolute worst fantasy, but the probable worst. Are there other ways to explain the situation or the feeling? And a really pragmatic one. Is thinking this way actually helping me right now?
That last one's powerful. And they make a distinction about different kinds of thinking.
Yes. They contrast unhelpful thinking, catastrophizing, wishful thinking, ignoring reality, and realistic thinking. Realistic thinking acknowledges difficulties but assesses probabilities and outcomes fairly. It's grounded, it accepts discomfort might happen, but doesn't assume disaster.
Got it. Then step 3 is generating alternatives.
Based on the evidence you gathered during the challenge phase, you develop more balanced, helpful, and realistic thoughts to replace the unhelpful ones. The manual actually provides a table format for this.
Oh, like a worksheet.
Yeah, where you write down the situation, the initial anxious thought, the evidence for and against, your new realistic alternative thought, and then you rate your anxiety level before and after working through it. Very structured.
And they list typical thinking errors people make.
Oh, yes. Things like all or nothing thinking. If I feel any anxiety, the whole day is ruined. Using absolutes like always or never, blaming yourself entirely for negative events, focusing only on weaknesses, fortune-telling, I know I'll panic, magnifying negatives, using lots of shoulds and musts, assuming things can't change.
Recognizing those patterns must be a big step in itself.
Huge. And related to generating alternatives, they talk about coping statements.
Like little phrases you can say to yourself.
Exactly. Short, positive, realistic statements you can have ready to use in the moment. They suggest linking them to a physical cue, like taking a slow breath.
What are some examples?
Things like, I can take this one step at a time. This feeling is uncomfortable, but it can't harm me. I've handled this before. They also stress avoiding self-criticism like, I'm useless, and actively practicing self-praise when you manage something difficult, even partially. It's about building an internal counter-narrative to the panic.
Okay, there's one more major area the manual covers, which might seem a bit different. Assertiveness. Why is that included in a panic manual?
Well, the connection is that difficulty being assertive can lead to increased stress, frustration, or resentment, which keeps your general arousal level high, making you more vulnerable to anxiety and panic.
Okay. So it's about managing interpersonal stress better.
Exactly. They define assertiveness clearly. Communicating your opinions, needs, feelings directly, honestly, appropriately. Respecting your own rights without denying the rights of others.
And they contrast that with being aggressive, which violates others' rights, and being non-assertive or passive, where you hold back.
Right. And they note that non-assertion, while often aimed at avoiding conflict, can paradoxically lead to bottled-up feelings that eventually explode, or just contribute to that chronic background stress. Family patterns can play a role, too.
So being assertive helps you feel more in control, more self-respecting.
It helps you manage situations better, which reduces stress. It's not necessarily about solving every problem instantly, but about expressing yourself clearly so problems can be addressed. And if others react badly to your reasonable assertion, the manual suggests that's often their issue, not yours.
Do they give examples?
Yeah, really practical ones, like how to respond if a neighbor keeps dropping in uninvited, or dealing with unfair criticism from a boss or someone cutting in line. They show the non-assertive way, bottling it up, the aggressive way, lashing out, and then the clear, calm, assertive response.
That comparison must be really helpful. And they mentioned a Bill of Assertive Rights.
Yes, this is fascinating. Just reading these can be eye-opening for people who feel they don't have a right to their own needs or opinions.
What kind of rights are on there?
Things like the right to be the judge of your own behavior, thoughts, and emotions. The right not to offer reasons or excuses for your behavior. The right to decide if you're responsible for finding solutions to others' problems, the right to make mistakes and be responsible for them, the right to say, I don't know, the right to say, I don't understand, or even, I don't care. And a big one, the right to say no without feeling guilty.
Wow. Just internalizing those could make a big difference, couldn't it?
Yeah.
It links back to challenging those shoulds and musts in your thinking.
Absolutely. It reframes your internal sense of entitlement in a healthy way. And for tricky situations where straightforward assertion is difficult, they offer some protective skills.
Like specific techniques.
Yeah. Quick examples they give are the broken record, calmly repeating your point without getting sidetracked, selective ignoring, choosing not to respond to irrelevant or provocative comments, disarming anger, calmly stating you'll discuss it when the other person is calmer. Fogging, appearing to agree with some part of a criticism without actually conceding, just to diffuse tension. Tools for setting boundaries in tough spots.
Right, so lots of practical communication skills there. How do they wrap up this section?
They bring it back to the individual's choice, the decision to change. You have to weigh the pros and cons of becoming more assertive versus staying non-assertive. It takes conscious effort, determination, practice. Set realistic goals, start small, introduce changes gradually. Again, it emphasizes that recovery and change require active participation.
Okay, so pulling all this together, this deep dive into the CRU-FA manual, it really lays out a comprehensive, multifaceted approach, doesn't it?
Definitely. It's not just one thing, it's a toolkit. You've got the physiological tools, breathing, relaxation. You've got the behavioral tools, facing fears gradually, both outside and inside yourself with exposure. You've got the cognitive tools, identifying, challenging, changing thoughts. And the interpersonal tools, assertiveness.
It really shows how connected our bodies, thoughts, and actions are in anxiety and panic. And crucially, it offers very concrete, step-by-step ways to intervene in that cycle.
And the recurring theme is practice, skill building, and taking an active role. It's empowering, really. It says this isn't just something that happens to you. There are things you can learn and do.
So for you, the listener, maybe think about what stood out most from this. Was it the nuts and bolts of the slow breathing technique? The logic behind deliberately facing feared sensations? The process of questioning your own thoughts like a detective? Or perhaps those assertive rights, did any of those resonate?
Yeah, and given that consistent practice is so key, according to the manual, maybe a final thought to consider is this. How might consciously trying just one small thing we talked about, maybe noticing one specific thinking error you tend to make this week, or practicing that slow breathing for just 5 minutes each day, how might that single consistent action begin to shift your own experience the next time a challenging moment pops up?